Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for the attendees of the PyroLife project seminar. Thank you for attending the series of the webinars for the PyroLife project Symposium, which is towards an integrated fire management. My name is Nimar Abu Samha. I'm an early career researcher in the PyroLife project. I will conduct my PhD thesis in how wildfires spread in the wildfire interfaces. Today, I will be moderating the webinar with Professor Guillermo, who is a co-piloting of the webinar. And it's said behind each great webinar, there's a great co-pilot. This is the fourth series of the webinars, and it will be one of the main cores and recent methodology in wildfires and fire management. Today, we have two great speakers, Alexander Held, who is a senior expert at European Forest Institute, EFI, and Professor Paulo Fernando at the University of Trás-os-Montes and Alto Douro in Portugal. The webinar will discuss one of the main cores behind the PyroLife project and one of the main aims, which is the fires in the temperate regions and how to transfer the wildfires management knowledge from the south of the old European continent to the north of the old European continent, the temperate region. Alexander will discuss the recent fires in the temperate regions and how such fires are taking places, how such fires are taking places in Europe and are getting managed, and the importance of the international experience exchange and why adaptation to a new risk is still slow. Then followed up by Paulo, who will talk about the current large fire problem in the Mediterranean. Paulo will try to illustrate how extreme fire activity relates and it's driven by the land use and landscape changes, fire management policies, and fire weather. We will try to have a webinar of 30 minutes for each speaker, followed by Q&A session. Please write your questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to answer the most general and as much as time let us do. For now, I will give the mic to Alexander. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for this introduction. I just had to sort out my stopwatch that I have a bit of a guidance with my time. Without further delay, I tried to share my screen. Where was it? Here we go. I hope this is working now. It's not. Okay, just give me a sign, somebody, if that is visible for everybody. Okay. My name's Alex Held. I work at the European Forest Institute, and I'm part of the PyroLife consortium of this PhD program. And I would like to talk about the topic that new countries are on fire now, and how that new risk is handled or not handled in our environment. It is, I have to say, I'm a little bit nervous as I can't see the audience, and a lot of the things I have to say have been said before. So I hope I can put it in a new context and make a little bit sense out of it. My title is Vegetation Fire in Non-Fire Prone Countries. And I hope that especially the PyroLife PhD students, the early stage researchers, can take a little bit with it from this. And I must just see, okay. Fire was like, vegetation fire was like COVID-19 to us in, let's say, Northwestern Europe, Central Europe. I'm sitting in Germany. It was predicted. We knew for years about changing climate, changing weather patterns. And we had the first series of dry years in 17, 18, and 19, and also a very dry spring in 2020. And subsequently, we had much more fire than before, and everybody reacted very, very surprised. So I'm going to look with you on some of the developments in the past 3 years and try to figure out how that fits into the global picture of fire. So we knew it was coming, but nobody was prepared. Just to give you a bit of an idea from where I'm speaking, if we say non-fire prone countries, Germany, the Black Forest, southwestern part is a very, very good example. on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a bad example. I'm going to show you why. So to prepare this talk in the webinar, I had to get airborne and show you a little bit where we are. This is the River Rhine. This is France. Down here is Switzerland. This is the southern tip of the Black Forest. If you can see my cursor, can you see that cursor on the screen? Okay. And I'm sitting here talking to you right now. We were lucky with very, very dry and stable weather in spring, so we could do some flying for you and record it. From a bigger perspective, from this village to here, that's about 7 kilometers just for distance. And you see the southern tip of the Black Forest here, and here we go out into the River Rhine Valley. And I marked with these little very artistic red dots, I marked all the fire stations that we have. And we are very privileged in this part of Germany. Every village has a fire station, at least 2 fire trucks, if not more. And from that sense, we are more prepared than most other countries in the terms of we do have resources. Our problem, as you might expect, is this. Deliberately, I didn't take a picture with German fire trucks, but I think these are British fire trucks, but it is the same problem. We have highly skilled and highly equipped fire services that have to deal with a new problem, fire that is not stationary, fire that is moving through the landscape. And we in our typical reaction, which means firefighting, we try to apply techniques, tactics, and tools that are very successful for stationary fires. So these are just symbolic pictures on how our fire services are reacting to this. And this is not to blame the fire service. This is just to show you that one of the most trained and best equipped fire services in the world, probably, is totally overwhelmed with a new risk and a new phenomenon of vegetation fire. I said we're privileged in a way. If you look at our forest structure, not every part of Germany looks like this. Here we do have quite good forest road network. And even when we do refurbish our forest roads, you see on the bottom picture, there's quite some effort taken in roadside maintenance, left and right side of the road. This is not for fire, but you will see later that this can be used for fire prevention and fire management as well. If you look at our forest structure, again, this is not like the majority of German forests look like, but a percentage. We have here quite a close to nature forestry picture, 5 or 6 or 7 different tree species in different age classes, different diameter, different heights, lots of structure. If you look at the ground, no grass, not much fine fuel, and a very resilient system if it comes to bark beetle, storm, and other disturbances. The problem is if we have 3 years of drought, which we now have, we're in the 3rd year, that if this turns brown, it is not any longer a resilient forest. It might turn all into fuel and burn or not. We are still at the process to find out, okay, is this type of forestry more resilient towards fire than 100% pine monoculture? I assume it is, but to what, where's the tipping point? Where's the tipping point in the weather that even that resilient forest system becomes fuel? We don't know that yet. What we know is we had a serious rain deficit this year. Again, one we had in 17, 18, and 19. This is pretty much similar pattern, but you can see in this region about here, this is what you've seen from the aerial picture in this valley here. But you see, this is roughly half the rain that we received in the first 3 months of the year compared to the average. So climate change is a serious reality with us. You see here one of the oldest weather stations in Germany. It's recording since 1893. This is just the mean annual temperature just from April to July. And you see a very, very, very clear trend of a rising and increasing temperature. So we're past that stage of discussing, do we have climate change or not? Data is very, very clear. People can feel it. 3 years of drought, and this is resulting in a new fire situation. I took pictures here from EFIS. This is 2019, but 18 was exactly the same, and 2020 was a little bit better. But suddenly we have a lot of burned area, and we do have a lot of fires. Please keep in mind that these fires, as it says here, only fires bigger than 30 hectare are detected. Most of our fires are 0.5 hectare, 1 hectare, 2 hectare, 3 hectare, 5 hectare, 10 hectare fires are big fires for our standards, and they already cause a big disruption and problem. So all these fires are not in this statistic. Please keep that in mind. So the real number of fires in the real burned area is actually much higher, and we don't see this in any statistic because our national statistics only record forest fires. They don't record landscape fires. So all the agricultural burns are not included in the statistics. So reality is even more serious than what you see on this. And I showed you the landscape, the villages, the structure of the forest, the fire services, and now the third factor in this are the people. And maybe this is the most complicated factor. We have a very urbanized society here with a certain lifestyle, certain attitudes, perceptions. Everybody has an opinion on everything. Every person you meet out there in the forest that is there for recreation has an opinion on the local farmer and on the local forester and on the local hunter and all the local people that actually manage the land. Not always are these opinions very well informed, but they represent a whole set of different values. Most people use the forest and the landscape for fun, for mountain biking, for hiking, and the minority is actually persons that manage the land, live off the land, or are responsible to manage forest and landscape. So fire is meeting a very complex situation of values and opinions, and people are very concerned. Some are very concerned about the birds, and others about the sheep, and others about the trees. And in that mixture, you add fire now, and you try to add informed information based on knowledge exchange with other countries. And you can imagine how complicated that can become. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. This picture, I will repeat it later in the presentation, but we use all these nice words, and what I like most is living with fire. It sounds beautiful, and it is so self-explaining, and it hopefully doesn't mean that we have to live with mega fires and disaster fires, but that we can live with smoke in the air and with prescribed burning. And our reality here in Germany, if you take that as an example for new countries or non-fire prone countries, this is very difficult, because I'm going back to this. All these informed people with an opinion, once they smell smoke in the air, it's a problem. So if you have a barbecue fire and it is producing a little bit of smoke, half the village will talk about the smoke. So please don't tell me we can educate and change the attitudes towards living with fire if a barbecue fire is already a problem. It's a long road to go. And this is based on this slide, what I show here. We do have, I'm not sure if that is a global problem, but we in Germany especially true. We have a very simplistic approach to fire, very, very simplistic. So once it is contained and in a stove, or even better, in a BMW engine or Mercedes engine, then we love fire. The moment it's out in the landscape, it's bad fire. There's no discussion. I think there's in between. We have this. Some people think this is good fire. Some people think this is already bad fire because of the smoke. But it's a very, very simplistic approach. The good news for Germany is there is some universal truth. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, some things are true. And also our fires in the Black Forest or in Germany or in the Netherlands or in all these new countries, they all need oxygen, heat, ignition, and fuel. They all behave based on the fire behavior. Triangles, they burn uphill faster than downhill. They burn more intense on a south-facing slope than on a north-facing slope. So we can say, well, fire can't be that big of a problem if we look to other countries that have dealt with fire for decades. How difficult can it be to transform that knowledge and bring it to a new country like Germany? Because, and you will agree with me, prerequisites for any fire is ignition, fire weather, and enough of fuel. And this is also true in Germany, of course. So if you put it down to that basic level, you can talk to people and you can convince them that fire management actually can't be that complicated, can it? Problem with us is this universal truth has various perspectives and aspects, unfortunately. This new phenomenon of fire is meeting a very resilient culture. And I mean, this is a very stable, with resilient, I mean a very stable culture. This is the fire service culture. This is the whole society, how we deal with risk. And converting that and adapting to modern or innovative or educated fire management behavior is very, very difficult, because you challenge with all your news and the new risk, you challenge a very established system. And it's incredibly hard to convince otherwise well-functioning decade-old system to change and adopt. So this is resulting in a risk culture that we have. Living with fire is absolutely ridiculous. It's not realistic, because all our fires are managed by calling 112. We know all the details, we know the predictions, we know climate change, we observe the past years with all the fires, and still the majority, and even the educated politicians, fall in the trap of denial, in the belief, okay, we can control fire. We're very good in ignoring the fact that countries like America had 100 years time to prove that it's not so easy to control fires. Still, we're going down exactly the same road with this attitude. While the Portuguese can't fight fires, and the Spanish can't fight fires, and the Italians can't fight fires, but we can. You know, you see where the mistake is coming in here. Doesn't matter. It's a very stable system, very, very stable. And if you start talking integrated fire management, living with fire, reducing fuel, you become actually more uncomfortable than the fire itself. And I'm coming back to that, and that's why projects like this, like the PyroLife, is so important. Then another difference to the universal truth is our annual increment in our forest is about 4 cubic meters per second. So compared to many Spanish forests, for example, nothing against Spanish forests, but this is a lot of increment. We have a lot of wood and timber that is growing every second. And it's a question of time and weather when this will turn into fuel. And we invest a lot of money and resources and energy to do close to nature forestry and really, to the best of our knowledge, create resilient forests. The question is, where's the tipping point with the weather when all this turns into fuel? And this leads me to the last point here, understanding the risk. Priority number one in the Sendai framework, and if you listen to Peter Moore from the FAO, understanding the risk. This is our biggest challenge. We do not understand our risk. And I took a picture here from a book from, I don't know if you can see this, Andrew Scott, Burning Planet. It's quite good. If you say understanding your risk, we understand the fundamentals. We can explain the fundamentals. We can explain the fire environment, but we cannot refer back like Australia or America. We cannot refer back to a historical fire regime. We cannot say, oh, you know, in previous times and in historical times, the European Aborigines did burn or not burn or things. So to understand our problem, we don't have historical reference or not very much. So understanding the fire regime is a challenge because we don't have a regime. This is even leading to scientists, forestry professors saying that we have to suppress all fires because they're not part of our ecosystems. And this is a very strong statement from a forest protection professor, actually. I think it's neglecting the reality. We do have fires, we will have fires, but still the assumption is they don't belong here. And because they don't belong here, we should suppress all fires, or we can suppress all fires. So understanding our risk, if you look at this, is very difficult. If we go back deep in time, we find archaeology, we find coal. So there is a bit of a thing, okay, our landscape was burning, but can you translate this in a fire regime? Can you say if the Black Forest is burning every 300 years once, is that a fire regime? I don't know. So understanding our fire situation is quite a challenge if you look at this scale, because we're missing this historical record. So you see on a global map, we do have fires, but nowhere near fire adapted ecosystems like Africa's, sub-Saharan Africa, for example, where you can say, okay, let's understand the fire regime. Let's understand what is natural, what is unnatural, where's the balance, what type of fire is good for the environment, what type of fire is bad, how frequent should it be, etc. This is all much easier in continents, in fire continents where the ecosystems are adapted and have a history with fire. We don't have that. But what we have in Europe, I took this from the European Commission document, Sparking Fire Smart Policies. We have a lot of knowledge in Europe that, of course, traditionally was focused on the Mediterranean countries and Portugal. But a lot of this can be at least used to understand what we're facing in these new countries like Germany. This, what you see here, is a summary of the past 20 years of research financed by the European Union, 100 million euros, and approximately the same amount was spent by national research projects in different countries. So that a lot of the research that we're currently doing in Germany, for example, has been done already. And it has been done twice or more. So for me, the big question is, are we using that information? Are we translating that information in applicable knowledge? And I doubt it. I think this is opening now the new question, where are we going? And how can this existing knowledge help us? If you think 100 million is a lot of money in 20 years, to put it into perspective, 100 million is something like the country of Italy is spending every year just on their Canadaires. So in terms of money compared to operational costs of fire suppression, this is not much that was invested in fire research. Still, it is 100 million in 20 years. You see here all the projects, 56 or 57 projects over the past 20 years. The majority in fire science and fire suppression. So there is a lot of existing knowledge that new countries like Germany, unfortunately, are very, very slow to use. Maybe it's not easily available. Maybe it's, you know, oh, this is just Mediterranean. It doesn't apply to Germany. I don't know, but it does exist, and we don't use it. What we know out of more than 20 years of European fire research is, of course, what should be in a fire strategy. What elements should be covered in an integrated fire management strategy. This graph here is, in picture here, is very nice. Also from the document I mentioned earlier, Sparking Fire Smart Policies. Germany, we are here. We're investing big time now in emergency management. We're investing big time in research. 22 projects are currently running in German funding only, not mentioning the EU funding just on fire. But there's very little investment here. Biomass management, very, very little. Urban and land planning, not existent. Social economy, not existent. So still, we know all this, and it's not, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to translate this from the Mediterranean to Central Europe. Still, we're not doing it. We know what elements are in a fire management plan. So this all could be applied to different aspects and levels. It is applied already in Germany, but like in many countries of the world, we're not, absolutely not investing anything in fuel management through land and forest management. So I don't want to go into detail here because this has been done and said by many other people. What we do here in Germany is we develop together with the Forest Research Institute a 4-3 crisis management approach, addressing 4 phases of crisis or risk management: preparedness, response, recovery, and prevention, and collect tools for the different levels. So what can you do, and what tool can you actually use on a forest stand level, on a forest enterprise level, and on a societal level or policy level? We collect tools like this. We collected this in Cardiff in the workshop on the UK Wildfire Conference. So there are different tools under each of these boxes. You find different tools for prevention, for preparedness, for recovery, for suppression, on different levels: stand level, enterprise level, national level, or you have other examples from South Wales like this. So there is a lot of work being done, yet the big problem is the reality really is we're still investing the majority, and this is nothing new for most of you, we're still investing in response. In Germany, we do the same. There's a lot of activism with working groups, national working groups, state working groups. Most of them are made up by fire service people. So fire service is discussing fire service stuff. You can't blame them. This is what they know. People like to discuss what they know. I like to discuss forestry, you know. So if, you can't blame people, but we're missing the coordinating function to say, you know, if you have national working groups, they should be a little bit balanced, and we need psychology help to overcome the problem. So I'm back to this picture, living with fire. We are very far of a society that would accept to really live with fire. Fires are still an accident, and we don't want them. The policies are all going into controlling fire, suppressing fire, and saying, well, historically we had no fires. In the future, we don't want fires, and we don't need fires. What does work is actually working with existing stakeholders and structures. This is not a very good picture, but this was one of the local hunters here. He was cutting an access route to his hunting area, and I could convince him to cut this line through from road to road to open the 2-meter high bush just as access option for the fire service for potential fire later, it was relatively easy to explain the hunter what the benefit is if he's cutting his line not only into the area but through the area. So this can work, and I think also with the farmers and the foresters, it proves that if you use what they're doing on a daily basis and explain this and link this to fire, you have to do this first before you go and say, well, I want to burn your forest because this is good for the future. This works, this doesn't work. So we need this really in the beginning, use what people are doing where they're not shy doing it. What are the options? Very, very often we discuss this, okay, it's response versus prevention. I think the new fire countries like Germany, we need both. We need a balanced approach. Of course, we need to invest more in our suppression capacities because we don't have capacity and experience and tools and techniques and tactics and education. So we need really to invest. Otherwise, I'm quite critical normally to say, invest in firefighting. Normally this is, this is a dark side, but actually we need a little bit of the dark side. And we might even discuss aerial firefighting in countries like Germany because we still need it. But we do the same mistake like many other countries. We're neglecting resilience mitigation prevention. What we really need is change. Not change in fire management in that sense, but first of all, before we start changing fire management and how we manage and live with fire, we need to change our risk culture, our perceptions, our opinions, our values. And good luck with that, you early stage researchers. I'm really happy that I'm past that stage. I tried to do it, but this is far more complicated than managing fire. Far more complicated. For that, based on the 20-some years that I can look back, my conclusion is we need the change. For that, you need a lot of friends. Make friends before you need them. We said this often in the past webinars. PyroLife, all the other projects, Paul Costa Foundation, you name it. This is all incredibly important to form friendships and networks. Why? I'm speaking again out of own experience. You need reassurance because you will be alone. You will be very, very lonely in your home country or in your new environment. You will be lonely in your own organization. If you really want to be the change that is allowing for better fire management or integrated fire management or living with fire in a society that can't even live with a barbecue fire, you will be very alone. And it does help you if you have a network, even if it's only on WhatsApp, where you can get reassurance that you get the global reassurance and you get a reality check from other countries, from more fire-prone countries, that you're actually on the right track as far as we know. And you will need that support of this network. So really make friends before you need them. Invest your time in people relationships. This is all the difference. The rest is technical, and we can learn it. We can do it. People skills, making friends. This is something that is really, really complicated, and only with friends we can be that change. And this hurts. What are the options? You have to explain. You have to walk the talk. And without reassurance, you burn your fingers very, very quickly in the truest sense of it. If you discussing with the Prime Minister of Australia the statement that climate change is to blame for the forest fires, you don't have many friends out there, because people tend to be friends with the Prime Minister rather than with you. So better you have some friends, really. I'm not talking, because my time is up, I'm not talking about climate change. I will leave this for you to read. This is not very scientific, but I like the message of this. This was 32 minutes of a very, very, very fast speech. I hope I didn't say anything that was too boring for all of you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alex, for the great presentation. Very, very knowledgeable and thoughtful, actually. Personally, I've learned a lot, actually, from it today. Thank you so much. So now we will move to the Q&A questions, and I'll give the mic to Professor Guillermo. Professor Guillermo, please.
Hello, I don't know if everybody can see me, but this is the voice of Guillermo Rein from London. The co-moderator, I have a few questions to read to Alex. I just want to say, Alex, we're your friends. Okay, so it was a great call that was a really good advice. So we just want to say that we're your friends. So first question, Alex, if you don't mind, is from Carmen. And she would like to know more about the firefighting volunteers that you have in Germany. How do they work? Who do they work with? And do they exist in the whole of Germany?
Yeah, we have a very, very interesting development in Germany. My friends from Ireland say other countries have motorbike clubs and you have fire clubs. That's true. Many years, firefighters have realized, okay, we're going to forest fires, to wildfires. We don't have the equipment, we don't have the training. And when they turned to the fire service and said, we want better equipment, we want training, it was not provided by the official training structures. So as a result, they turned to private initiative and they started to create clubs, if you wish, like a soccer club, and they arranged own training for them. They went to America, they got the American support, they got training materials. I think we have 3 or 4 now in Germany of these private initiatives, and this is a result of a lack of leadership, I would say, from a government perspective. It is a good thing, these private initiatives, because it's leading the way. It is showing fire services what can be done with international exchange, with own initiative. And the state is following now. It took 20 years that state fire schools are following now, running forest fire curricula and training. So these clubs are very active in training volunteer fire services, communal fire services. I think it's a very important part in a country like Germany to have this private initiative.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Second question is coming from Canada, is Marty Alexander. He's asking what are some of the causes, I guess, the main causes of wildfires in Germany? The ignition sources.
Men, women, and children. It's the same. It's mostly accidental. We don't have a arsonist problem like you would have heard from Craig in Wales. Arson does happen, but it's not very common. Most of our fires are accidental. It's cars. It's working. It's harvesting machines. We have a specialty here with old ammunition, unexploded ordnance from some of the areas here have a 150-year military use history and the war that went through. So we have self-ignition of some of the old ammunition, but the majority, like everywhere, is human and it's accidental.
Thank you. The third question is by Johannes, and he would like to know how common are prescribed fires as a management tool in Germany today.
We started in the year, I think, 2001. Some started a bit earlier, but the majority started around 2000 with using fire for nature conservation. This was mainly burning heather, like you would know from Scotland, for example. On ex-military training areas, when the military stopped disturbing these areas, they started to develop into forest. And from a nature conservation perspective, we had to mimic a little bit of the military disturbance. Prescribed fire was opportunistic to do. Heather likes fire, so controlled fire or prescribed fire for nature conservation is happening in Germany on a miniature scale. It is not worth talking about it. It's a few hectares per year. It's really not much, but we do have people that have the skill of using a trip torch, understanding ignition patterns, playing between fuel and weather. So there are a few people, but at the moment, this is all nature conservation. And the process, again, because of the past 2-3 years, it's now starting that we think, okay, if whales can use fire also for tactical purposes like burnout operations, we're starting to invest in that now. But at the moment, it's mainly nature conservation. And it's funny enough, 15 years ago, when you went and asked for a burn permit, people in the nature conservation authorities, they would say, oh, this is interesting. This is pioneering. Let's try it. Here's my signature. 15 years later, I don't know what happened in our society, but you hardly find anybody in a government agency to give you a signature on a permit. I don't know what that is, but it's increasingly difficult to get a burn permit.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Now, the next question comes from Chile, and you're very lucky because it's written in Spanish, so I can translate it to you. It's from Patricio, and he says that how does Germany face the challenge of climate change and fuel accumulation and the use of prescribed burning while for 40 years they and maybe in Germany as well have been saying no to fire, like all fires are bad, like stop fire. How do you, I mean, you alluded to this in your presentation, Alex. He's just wanted for you to say more about it.
Very good question, Pato. Nice to see you, by the way, all the way from Chile. Our forestry, we have big discussions on biodiversity. We have big discussions on forest conversion close to nature. We have big discussions on deadwood in forests. We have a massive bark beetle problem now since the past 3 years. So forestry and forests are in the news, in the discussion every day. Compared to bark beetle, storm and drought, fire is still a little bit of a smaller problem. And if you discuss deadwood for biodiversity and then you come in with fire and you talk about fuel accumulation, it becomes very, very complex. We come to a point where we say, yes, we want deadwood in the long term. It's helping our forests in water retention capacity, the soil, humus layer, etc. But we don't want it left and right from the forestry roads. There we want a fire resilient landscape that gives us opportunities to fight fire. Fuel accumulation is of course a problem. It's all very productive. We cannot graze the forest. We cannot burn the forest because the resistance at the decision-making level, the skepticism against fire. How can fire be good? This is all very, very, despite the 20 years of work that we try to do with fire and nature conservation, the majority is still not ready for it. And then again, you have voices from science that say, we don't have a fire regime, so we should ban all fire, also prescribed fire, because historically we never had it, so it doesn't play a role here. And they're totally neglecting that if you like it or not, it will play a role. And it's the same like when I worked down in South Africa. For me, the only question is, do I decide when it's burning, or does the fire decide when it's burning? But we are far from that. We are far from that in Germany, Pato.
Thank you. We do have time for, I think, maybe 2 questions, if they are short. There is a question from Andy Elliott in the UK. He says, hi, Alex. And he says, how do we turn the 100 million euros of research into action? And what could the priorities be?
Andy, if I had an answer to this question, I would say all the future investment, or the majority of future investment in research, should actually go into that question. We foresters or we firefighters should leave that topic to psychologists, to social sciences. I think if we could invest some money in champions. You know, if I look back, who made the change in South Africa? These were a handful of people. Who made the change in Portugal? A few people, you know, these drivers, these champions. Who is driving it in South Wales? Who's driving it in Ireland? Who's driving it in the UK? If our systems would empower these champions, I think it would help a lot in getting the knowledge, the information transferred into knowledge and in applied knowledge. But then think about the funding mechanisms we have, both on national level and on the European level. Get funding for a network. This means you ask for funding for organized chaos. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. But I think this could be a step in the right direction. But I'm not clever enough to give an answer.
Thank you. And I think this will be the last question. Pooja asks, is there any way to fill the gap in knowledge about good fire and bad fire in terms of ecosystem balance?
I think worldwide we have such good examples of good fire. If you look into Western Australia, if you look into Africa, if you look into the States, Canada, the boreal forests in Russia, you find such good examples of good fire. Land use fire, historical fire, aboriginal fire. For me, the big question is that transferable? Can we use the positive message of aboriginal fire in Australia? Can we use that in a country like Germany? I think you have to go very, very far back to find some German aborigines that run around and burn the bush. It's not so easy to transfer that from a fire adapted landscape or continent to a place where fire doesn't have history. I'm sure we could find very, very useful fire, beneficial fire in our pine forests to create more structure, to open up this monoculture of even-aged forests. Fire could be used for that. So difficult, but it can be. Again, all our research is going into fire modeling, fire suppression, fire detection, understanding if trees resprout after fire. I'm not aware, for the current situation in Germany with its 22 projects, I'm not aware of one project that would say, well, except of my project, of course, that would say, does fire have a beneficial role? You know, and it's not an easy answer because it's not a savanna here. It's not Miombo woodland. But I'm sure we are at that point at burning heather, Kaluna on the military sites. Fire is beneficial, but only if you're a friend of heather. If you're a friend of forests, fire in the heather is preventing forests to take over. So again, it has different aspects, but I think the space, there's enough fire, there's enough space for different.
Thank you, Alex. We should stop here. There are more questions that you can answer, I think, typing, and you can go ahead with those. They're very good questions as well. And I pass it back to Neimer with the next speaker.